Hey guys, just a reminder, my online course is Birth Story Academy, and you can enroll in it at birthstory.com. It's taught by me. You can be in your jammies. It's online. It's pre-recorded, and it has a ton of freebies and downloads. It's everything that you need to prepare for your hospital birth. So hope to see you in Birth Story Academy. Okay. Have you guys ever heard of craniosacral therapy or CST? Some would refer to it as like infant or baby CST, but you can do craniosacral therapy all the way through anyone. And this is something that I will hang my head, you guys. I refer a lot to IBCLCs and lactation consultants and chiropractors who then refer to CSTs. But I had never done a deep dive into what in the world is craniosacral therapy? How does it work? Why does it work? I see the success stories on the back end from my doula clients coming back to me and saying, oh, we had XYZ issue with feeding or colic or digestive issues. And we went to this craniosacral therapist and we loved her and life is great. But I never really understood what that journey looked like. And so today I interviewed an expert, Meaghan Beames from Toronto, Canada, who is a craniosacral therapist who is a teacher also and owns Beames CST, which is a school to become a craniosacral therapist. And we tell you everything about how the body works, fascia, cerebral spinal fluid, and really understanding the role of birth and fetal position and womb position, and the role of epidurals, and all of the things that could contribute to tight fascia. So this is an educational opportunity for everyone. If you are a birth worker, if you are pregnant, if you have a child, then this episode is for you, and I hope you'll share it with a friend. All right, let's get to it. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this Birth Story family. Hey, Meaghan, welcome to the Birth Story podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, you guys just heard in the intro, we're learning about craniosacral therapy, and this is Meaghan's expertise. It is not mine. I'm very excited for an expert interview today. So thanks for being here. Meaghan, tell us about where you live in the world and a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, I live in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada, if you don't know where that is. So big city of Canada. And I'm right downtown. So I love, it's like a little mini Manhattan. And I'm also a registered massage therapist and a craniosacral therapist, but specifically, I'm a craniosacral therapist for babies. I also have my own practice where I've got other massage therapists working for me doing craniosacral therapy for babies. So we kind of have made a name in our city as the place to go for craniosacral therapy for babies. And when I opened my business, it took only a year for it to get really busy. And so I needed to have more people. So I opened a school in 2020. And so I started training health professionals how to become an infant craniosacral therapist. So that's through my school at Beames CST. And so since 2021, when I first started teaching, since then I have 160 graduates across the whole world, actually, across the globe.
Oh my gosh. I love when people like do good and then the ripples and then the ripples and the ripples.
Yeah.
Imagine how many people then those 160 people are mentoring and who they're mentoring and like, just so amazing the
So
things that we can do.
it is. My goal is to indirectly treat 1 million babies. So if I can train 1,000 practitioners and those 1,000 practitioners treat 1,000 babies, then we'll meet that 1 million babies mark, which is my biggest goal. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that you're going to accomplish that. I also love that you have a goal, a big goal in running your
I
business.
do.
I think it's great. Okay. So you guys, I have Meaghan on because I am like, what is craniosacral therapy? Okay, now no judging, you guys. You know, if you listen to this podcast, I've been a birth doula for 21 years. So why in the world would a birth doula go, what is craniosacral therapy? Okay, I've heard of it. I refer to craniosacral therapy. I go through my lactation consultant. So we're going to kind of get into this. But have I ever gone the extra mile to talk to a CST? No. Sat in on a session? No. Did I use CST for my own children? No. So you guys, I'm learning. I am the student today from Beames CST. I am learning along with you what in the world craniosacral therapy is, who needs it, what you do. I mean, I have all of the questions today, Meaghan. So
I have all the answers.
okay,
So,
this is perfect. All right, so the first thing is let's define like what is craniosacral therapy specifically to what you do in babies and newborns and what brought you to this? Like how did you know what this is?
so craniosacral therapy, even though it's a very long word and it sounds mystical, it does have a little bit of like a woo-woo, but it's actually very scientifically based. So there's tons of studies backing it up. And so what we do with craniosacral therapy is we find areas of the body that are stuck. So if you know what fascia is, and if you don't know what fascia is, if you peel the skin off of either chicken or even an orange, if you're vegan. So if you peel the skin off of an orange, and then you go to the actual slice of the orange, and then you peel the extra skin, that is what fascia is like for us humans. So it's not our actual skin, it's a layer underneath. And this layer underneath is very protective. So it's reactive to stressors. So it could be an injury, it could be a fall, it could be surgery, it could be pressure, it could be whiplash, it could be anything. But what happens is it reacts to these stressors and it tightens up. Then when things tighten up, the body systems don't work so well because the messages from the brain aren't being sent through the nerves to whatever muscle it is that they need to send messages to, or the circulatory system doesn't work very well. And so we're not getting enough blood flow to different areas. So, the people who have both feet are always cold, they've got fascia that's stuck in their abdomen. The people who are, who don't poop every day, they've got fascia stuck in their abdomen as well. The people who are like, oh, I've had a crick in my neck for my whole life, they have tight fascia. So CST is a way of finding those tight areas and softening them so that the body works. It sounds very big, but it's actually very simple.
Whoa. Okay. I feel like you said like woo woo. I'm going to call it like divine magic over here. I have literally just started working with a body worker. His name's Joe. And
Thanks, Joe.
we've had 4 sessions together because I've had vertigo for 7 months. I've been like so dizzy, I cannot even tell you. And I went to see him not for dizziness. I actually just went because my like back chronically hurts from being a doula. So when I tell you I went to get a massage, Meaghan, and 4 times now, he's never even left my back or neck. He literally joked and said, well, next time, maybe your fascia will allow me to get to your legs and feet. And I was like, I mean, I'm going for 80-minute massages and we're only at my back. He's like, he said, your fascia is like, oh, release, haha, just kidding. And then it like tightens back up again. But
okay, can I tell you why?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I was like, wait, I'm just learning about this as an adult in my real body right now.
Yes. And the reason why he's like, haha, your fascia is not loosening up is because the back is reactive to the actual primary issue. And the primary issue is on the front. So not to say that he is not understanding the body properly, but he probably just doesn't have the knowledge of visceral fascia and the effects that visceral fascia play on the back, the neck, the shoulders, and vertigo. So if you had a car accident, I'm so sorry. I'm going to tell you everything.
Oh, no. I'm like so fascinating, right? Because this last session, something changed. I felt something change. And when he grabbed like behind my ears. Well, I was on my back at this point. He had rolled me over to do the neck work, you know. And when he held my neck and did whatever, it was the first time like the dizziness instantly stopped. And I had never mentioned the dizziness to him. And I was like, oh my gosh, I like literally the room stopped spinning and the room's been spinning for 7 months, you know? And he was like, oh my goodness, interesting. So anyway, I'm still spinning a little bit, but I'm spinning way less since this last session.
Okay. So spinning is usually tension at your what do people call this? I call it a clavicle, collarbone.
I call it clavicle, but yeah,
collarbone. You do?
Okay.
So, layman terms, it's the collarbone, but it's the clavicle. So if there's tension in your clavicle, usually it travels up these 2 muscles that go along the side and they attach behind your ear and they pull. And so because they're pulling right around that bone, that's where your equilibrium is. So they're tight and it's throwing off your equilibrium. So it's actually an issue down here, not an issue in your neck.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to be now making more sessions. Okay. Or seeking out a craniosacral therapist for this, you guys. But this is why this conversation with Meaghan is so important. And we're about to get into like babies and newborns. I promise this episode isn't going to be all about me, but for 7 months, you guys, the amount of money I have spent. I have had an MRI with contrast of my brain. I've had a cardiac ultrasound of my heart. I've been hospitalized for 3 days. I've been to the chiropractor. I've been to acupuncture. I've been to massage therapy. I have taken supplements. I have done all the things, including functional medicine and regular doctors and endocrinology, like, ear, nose, and throat. I have been to everything because, as you guys know, listen, I'm very proactive about keeping my body safe. And no one's found an answer. Like literally everyone's like, sorry, you're dizzy. Your body is perfect. Like from a Western medicine perspective, right? Like everyone's like, well, it just is what it is, you know? And then finally he grabs my neck in this certain way last week and the room stopped spinning. And I was like, well, clearly something's going on with this, you know?
Yeah.
So fascinating. All right. Now,
that
Meaghan.
Is fascia.
So now that we're learning about fascia, you guys, this translates to your baby, to feeding, to all of the things. And that is why I refer to craniosacral therapy, literally having no idea what in the world Meaghan does. So now I'm so fascinated and I know that my clients go to see craniosacral therapists and then these issues get better. But I'm really trying to understand what is craniosacral therapy, what you do, and why babies get better. So let's stop talking about me.
That's okay.
But thank you for taking a deep dive with me to help understand fascia and fascia release. Okay, but can you define the words cranio and then define the word sacral?
Absolutely. So cranial is the cranium, right? So your head, and sacrum is the bone that's at the very bottom of the spine. And they, in 1970, the guy who developed this found that the fluid that ran from the cranium to the sacrum, so craniosacral, it flowed to the cranium and then down to the sacrum and then back up to the cranium and then down to the sacrum in kind of like this wave-like fashion. And if that craniosacral rhythm was off in any way, and meaning off, it was like either asymmetrical from side to side, or if it kind of got stuck on the way, then the system in the body would be thrown off as well. So this fluid has to run very easily along your spinal cord and along the spinal column in order to clean out the body as well. So this fluid is called cerebral spinal fluid, and this cerebral spinal fluid encases the brain. So that is the fluid that everyone's like, oh, your brain is floating in water. No, it's floating in cerebral spinal fluid. And so this fluid runs all throughout your entire nervous system. Like it goes through the nerves as well. And so what this cerebral spinal fluid does, or SCF, um, S, SPF, cerebral spinal fluid,
CSF.
CPF. Why did I get that wrong? Cerebral is a C, PF, CPF, SPF. Oh, that's why. I was thinking about.
I can't even write it down right. I would just call this, for me, this is called mom brain. I wrote CSF, like I just missed the P altogether.
That's fine. You know what? I think it is CSF. That's why I'm having such a hard time.
Guess what, you guys? Who cares about the acronym?
I was trying to make it easier for people to understand because I talk fast, but I just made it worse. So cerebral spinal fluid. So it's CSF. Oh my God. Cerebral spinal fluid is, along with, like, the lymphatic system, which everyone is getting pretty familiar with. It cleans out your body toxins, or it helps to clean out. So if this cerebral spinal fluid is not moving well because of stuck fascia, then you can get an increase of toxins in your body. You can get, areas of your body that just don't heal very well or take longer to heal because they're not cleaning out those toxins. And so that's our body's natural way of healing itself. But if the fascia is tight, we can't heal ourselves as optimally. Okay. So
let me ask you a question then, because a lot of times this is the way my referral system goes. I'm their doula. They've had some sort of birth, vaginal, cesarean birth. Then I'm going to say they graduate from my care as their birth doula. I still stay on call for this sacred postpartum period, and that's when I start making referrals. So usually I go to chiropractor first to bring everything into alignment, and then they go to the IBCLC, the lactation consultant. But I don't have CST in my rotation. I go chiropractor and IBCLC together, and then they usually consult together to refer to CST. Would you say that my process needs to change?
Yes,
okay.
I do.
Okay. That's why I'm here today.
Yes. And this is not to say bad things about chiro. I believe that chiro and craniosacral therapy is a magical system together when combined. But I do believe that the CST should come first, and I rarely ever say should. I use that very sparingly. CST should come first because alignment is fascia. And let's say you have something stuck in the front of your body, and the chiro says, well, if I work on the back of the body and align your spine, the front should react and should change. But it's the opposite. The back will change when the front is taken care of first. So the chiro's work will last longer. So you won't have to go back next week. Or, when you get out of the chiro and you walk to your car and it goes back, it won't do that because the front body has been taken care of first. So the front body a lot of times is the primary issue.
This is
And
so
yes.
interesting, Meaghan. Okay,
Mhm.
so now let me just go back to Joe for just a minute. I'm now
Okay.
remembering. Okay, so I'm still laying at this point. I'm laying face down, and in my mind, Joe's working on my back. But now I'm having a memory. He does put these like kind of bolsters on one side, and then he reaches towards the belly button, and so
Yes.
he's working on my abdomen, but I'm still
Yes.
face down while he's working on it, and I could barely handle it. I was like laughing so hard because I'm so ticklish. I was dying. And he says this line I've never heard before. He said, "That is pain."
Yes.
Being the feeling of being ticklish is actually pain that your body doesn't know what to do with. And so I couldn't be touched on my abdomen at all without dying laughing. And he was like, "This is all." I remember him saying, this is your back, this is the fascia, this is the pain, but it's your brain doesn't know what to do with it, so that's why you're giggling. So that you're nodding your head, Meaghan. So this is true.
Yes, because so tickle and pain follow the same nerve pathway. They are the same nerves.
Mind blowing to me right now.
Yes. Yes.
Mind blowing. So tickling my children when they were little was probably not a nice thing to do to them.
Yes. And so when they tickle and giggle, you think, oh, giggle fun. But but their brain is saying, I'm in danger. I'm in danger. This is not okay.
Oh my God. And we're probably releasing like adrenaline and cortisol throughout their body by thinking we're playing a fun game.
Yes.
I mean, I was on the table and my mind is like being blown. And then I'm like, well, can you stop? Because it really tickles. And after about 5 or 7 minutes, the sensation of tickling went away and it
Mhm.
just felt like normal touch.
Yes.
So I had to just
Because
get
of that
through it.
relief
Yeah.
and release. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So babies are a version of adults. So
Absolutely.
okay. So this is so interesting to me. Okay. So you would think in my rotation, baby is born out of the vagina or out of the belly, and part of their postpartum care should be going to CST. But when?
I would say within the first day is optimal.
Okay.
And so what I want to say first is that a lot of parents, I should say, there are so many parents who are starting to think, wow, my baby just went through a lot. I should probably see if they're doing okay in their body. And that to me is like wonderful because for many, many years, especially the last, let's say 20, 30 years, with epidurals and the increase of epidurals and the increase of Pitocin, babies are completely forgotten in the birthing process. So they are an active participant in this birth. They are trying to navigate the birth canal, and sometimes they can't because they're in a poor position. And then the epidural, and this is no shame for epidural or Pitocin, but this is just the baby's perspective of being born with the use of these things, is that they are then kind of forgotten and the ones who have to do the work now. They used to have a partner before the epidural, and now they're on their own. And so they have to navigate, but they're in this stuck position. And so they're trying to turn, they're trying to move their head through the birth canal, and a lot of times they can't. And so as they are trying to navigate, they are turning their heads or trying to. Um, they and as they're turning their heads and navigating through the birth canal, they're also getting pushed up against bones. So it's not this, they're not floating in water. They are pushed up against the pubic bone. They're pushed up against the sacrum, and it's usually their head if they're head down. And
I've got to stop you right there, Meaghan.
tell me,
Um, Oh, because that one just hit me so hard as a birth worker, and I have a certification training in spinning babies, and it's because you said they used to have a partner before the epidural. And after the epidural, they've lost their partner and they're doing this on their own. And I want to echo what you said. It is not to shame anyone, right? Like I utilized what I would say was compassionate use of an epidural in my first birth. And then in my second birth, went without any medication and free movement of my body. And that's what we're talking about is that especially in the absence of a bedside nurse, midwife, or doula, you lose much of that intuitive movement. Before an epidural, think back on your birth, you guys, have you had an epidural? Before your epidural, you had like divine intuitive movements. You were rocking, you were swaying, you were walking, you were lunging, you were getting to the toilet, you're even in the tub, you're moving in the shower. And then the second we get the epidural, we stop moving. And so I think that's what Meaghan, right, you're alluding to is that you and your baby were working together. And now you're no longer working together in partnership. Now you are trusting that just your uterus is going to squeeze the baby and the baby is going to be on their own to navigate their pelvis. Now, hopefully you could have, I would say someone like me that could help a little bit, but I'm guessing as an external partner what your baby needs versus your intuitive movements. So if you have it on your heart to just get through an unmedicated birth, there are a lot of positive unmedicated birth stories that you can listen to on this podcast and other podcasts because I just needed to say that because you hit me right there. Like I was like about to start tearing up when you said that, when you said the baby used to have a partner and now they're on their own.
Yeah.
So, okay. So continue with that, with their head bumping up against the sacrum.
Their head. Yeah. And I also believe that the use of epidural is sometimes the most important thing in order to get this baby born vaginally, if that is the goal, and if it hasn't been too long, and if the baby is okay with it, right? And so again, no shame on epidural, none at all. But use of epidural and continuing to move, continuing to get a leg up using the peanut ball, going on your side, going on all fours if you can manage it. If it's not so high that you have no feeling left in your legs, if you could have it a little bit lower and continue to kind of just like move a little bit. I also understand the importance of going to sleep after getting an epidural because you haven't slept for 36 hours. So, again, no shame at all, but please don't forget about your baby. Continue to talk to your baby. Because they are doing it on their own. But if they've got at least someone being like, you're doing great, you just got to maybe turn your head a little bit. Maybe that's all they need, right? Just to not feel so alone. Because they are sentient beings. They are fully aware that they are being born, that they are going through this process. So their heads are navigating, right? Because the pelvis has, bigger areas and smaller areas and your baby has to like Tetris its way through the canal. And that's why movement is so important. But so as they're moving, even in the most beautiful experience, even in the most, easy labors, this baby is still navigating and their fascia is still getting tight in different areas. So no, it doesn't, they could, rose petals in the bathtub, I say. You could have rose petals in the bathtub and a beautiful lotus birth. And the baby still has fascial restrictions. Now, these fascial restrictions are going to be usually around their neck, around their throat, in their face, behind their nose, and then along in their spine and in their abdomen. These get tight just because of the journey through the birth canal, no matter what type of journey it is.
I would say, and fetal positioning, right?
Exactly.
You guys, your baby's usually on the left side or usually on the right side. Like they have a favored womb position, especially if they're
Correct.
sharing that space with another sibling that's in there and it's even tighter,
Oh,
or septum or a fibroid or a bicornuate uterus. Like,
yep.
there's, then they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was trying to say this, Meaghan, from the doula's perspective, is I've never in 21 years, over probably 1,200 births now, I've never seen a baby not come out with, let's say, the cords around their neck, then their head is tilted a little to the left or a little to the right or a little asynclitic, or the head has to mold to just get through the pelvis. Their shoulders, sometimes they have one arm up by their face, which means their backs are very rounded and their shoulders are very tight coming through. And maybe they've been in this position for a very long time. So I
Yes.
watch this fetal positioning as they're born, and I actually chart it for my clients, right? Like, did the baby
Oh,
come
that's
out
so
and
good.
rotate to the left? Did they come out and rotate to the right? Was their left shoulder born first? Was the right shoulder born first? I think these are important things to note about a birth. Do you think those are important to note?
Absolutely. So what I love to say is like, do you have any videos of them being born? Because it tells me so much about this baby.
Oh,
And if they
wow.
don't have videos, I've watched lots of my clients' videos, birth videos, and I'm so excited about it. But if they don't, then I ask for pictures of, right after birth. What does the baby look immediately after birth? Because again, that tells me like, where was the bruising? Was their hand still up under their chin? How much of a cone shape was it? And that tells me a lot about what's going on inside that baby's cranium and their craniosacral rhythm and what their feeding journey is going to be like.
Yeah. Back to that fluid rhythm too is now what I'm thinking about, is because everything's so contorted,
Yes.
and it actually takes them, in my opinion, I see it's weeks before there's like an unfolding, right? They just go right back to
Yes.
their womb position, right back to their womb position. I do first latch as a birth doula, and I have to literally look at how they were born, and I have to put them on the left side of their body or the right side of their body in order to get them to do first latch. Because if they were head down in an LOA position when they were born, then that means they were using their left side to lay on. That means I have to feed them on their left side. If I try to rotate them to their right side to feed for the first latch, they're not going to latch. They're going to be angry because they want to be on their left side. They want to be in their womb position. They don't want to be in a new position, learning a new skill. Suck, swallow, breathe. So so anyway, but they eventually will feed on both breasts and in different positions usually. But from a doula's perspective, that's usually the first thing that I look at, is getting them to feed on that side of their original womb position.
And what I would say to that is the babies that you get to be the birth doula for are so incredibly lucky, because that is their first experience with it. And that is what is cementing in first latch, but also latch continuing on. And the babies who are forced on to the breast, they're forced on to latching. They don't get that intuitive movement. They don't get those reflexive movements that are igniting the suck, swallow, breathe pattern, and they're thrown off quite a bit. So the babies who get to have that, the breast crawl or that type of thing, is very coordinating for their brain. That's not to say that if you don't get the breast crawl on the first day, you can't do it the second or the third or the fourth week. You can they still have these innate reflexes. But if that's their first experience, then they're so lucky.
The breast crawl is so cool to watch. I mean, they
Yeah.
really will move and scoot and turn the head in the way in which that feels the most comfortable to them. It's very cool.
Yeah.
So right now my process is a little bit backwards, but let me go
That's good.
into my process And I will tell you why my birth doula clients go to craniosacral therapy. It is usually sleep, colic, feeding.
Okay.
So, failure to gain weight, trouble with breastfeeding, really gassy or upset or just fussy. What are some of the main reasons you see babies and newborns coming to craniosacral therapy besides very proactive parents that just are concerned about babies' movements from the time they're born?
The things that you already mentioned are the number 3 to 4, top
Okay.
3 to 4 that come to me. But I would say that for me, in my own opinion, in my own almost 1,000 babies opinion, is that babies who are born should be going to see a craniosacral therapist,
No matter how they're born.
no matter how. My babies, my first son, well, I only have 2, totally have 1. My first baby, he was born in the tub. Um, and, pushing was 45 minutes. So for me, pushing for 45 minutes is a long time, in my experience with the babies who I've seen. Um, and he didn't feed on both sides. He fed very well on one side, and it was so incredibly painful on the other. And, uh, if I had seen a craniosacral therapist for that very easy bath birth, um, probably my feeding journey would have been easier. And he wouldn't have an asymmetrical jaw now, and he probably wouldn't have had as many dental issues as he's had because he was a mouth breather. He's 8 now. Um, and then my second, she was born on the couch. Um, Very easy birth, pushing for 15 to 20 minutes. Um, she didn't feed well. So again, beautiful. Like I loved my births. They were wonderful, but my babies still had things they are 6 and 8 now. That are throwing them off now, right? So it doesn't matter the kind of birth. This baby deserves to have relief from what their experience is.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I'm going to ask you a woo woo question.
Okay.
So I've talked about my son Jagger as 1 zillion times on this podcast. He had a birth injury, he had a stroke, he has cerebral palsy, and he has hydrocephalus. So
Mhm.
these are things I don't understand. When you are talking about that fluid that's going from the top to down to the sacrum, back to the brain, back down, is that the same fluid that is the hydrocephalus, which is the extra fluid on my child's brain?
Correct.
Huh.
Correct.
This is so interesting. We've never been referred to craniosacral therapy for a child with, it's called communicating hydrocephalus. I guess it's like not, he's never had a stroke or headaches. So they just said, don't worry about it.
And they haven't put a shunt?
No. So we just do like
Okay.
CTs and MRIs and the fluid is the same. It's, um, hasn't been building up and he's 9 years old. So it hasn't been building up. So they haven't done anything. But it's just interesting to me that like, if there's maybe his flow is really good, even though there's extra fluid. Maybe the flow is really good. But this it's interesting to me because the stroke was on the left side of his brain, impacting the right side of his body. And then this is where I'm like, where you guys, where I say woo woo, okay? Like maybe this has nothing to do with anything, but like he keeps getting warts on his right ankle and right foot, which is the side of the body that was impacted from the left. The stroke on the
Mhm.
left impacts the right side of the brain. So I'm like, why does he have all these like warts? Like meaning his immune system or his body is not fighting, but it's like fighting fine on the left, you know? So I'm
Well,
like,
yeah, because warts are a virus, right?
they're a virus. Yeah. And it's a recurring virus. And so, anyway, I just wanted to hear like, would you, in your woo woo craniosacral, would you think that those two things are causal or just like randomly correlated?
So I don't like to. It would be mostly an assumption.
Okay.
Um, and I don't like to you. I don't like to say things are causal. only because I don't know.
Okay.
So
That's fair.
I like to say I usually strongly go with correlation. But and this isn't even woo woo. This is literally just that perhaps the right side of his body isn't working as well as the left side. If he's not moving his right side as well, there probably is less circulation. Is he spastic or which type of cerebral palsy is he? Flaccid or spastic?
It's called hypotonia.
Hypo. So,
Yeah.
so flaccid in my,
Yeah.
so
Tight.
he's not
Sorry. Is
pumping.
right? Right? Like it's tight.
Hyper. So
Sorry. You guys.
hypertonic. So spastic.
Hypertonic. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was like, listen, I
That's
got all the
okay.
words wrong today about my child. Yes. So things are like we do chiro and massage to like release the ankle because it's so tight. Like everything's
Yeah.
kind of pulled in and pulled
So
tight.
those muscles are pumps, right? And so if they're not pumping, they're not also bringing in new fluid.
Hmm.
So it's kind of stagnant. So if you're pumping the fluid, you might notice a difference in that side.
Okay. You guys, this was just me side noting because as Meaghan's talking, my wheels are turning about my own children. And
Yes.
so if you're not pregnant and you've already given birth, like, are your wheels turning right now? Like, what are you thinking about your child's sleep habits, their breathing, their feeding? Like, are you thinking about craniosacral therapy now? Because I am, and my kids are 9 and 10. I'm thinking about it for myself, and I'm 46 years old. This is very fascinating to me, Meaghan. So
I could talk to you a little bit off the podcast too about your son as well, because craniosacral therapy is an indicator for cerebral palsy and for seizures. So it's usually very beneficial to have craniosacral therapy.
I love this. So it's all about going back to the fascia and
Mm-hmm.
all about going back to the flow of
Yep.
that cerebral spinal fluid. And
Yeah.
so, did I say that correct since we don't
You
have the
did.
acronyms down? Yeah, see, I'm being an A+ student today, you guys, learning all
Yes.
about this. The way I'm envisioning it actually is like a river flowing, and then like someone like the earth had like a landslide and there's like some rocks or some turns or some sticks, and now all of a sudden the water isn't like the river isn't flowing as smoothly as it was in other parts of the river. That's how my mind is envisioning this.
Well, and we are 75% water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's very true. And so when I'm teaching my students, what I do is I put a rock on top of the pillowcase. And the pillowcase is the fascia and the rock is the stuck place in the body. And so we can actually feel by pulling, pushing, and kind of manipulating the pillowcase, we will be able to find the location of the stuck area. And so when we have a body that we're working on, whether it's a baby or a child or an adult, we can find those rocks that are the stuck areas. So what I tell my students all the time is like, you're just looking for the rock. You're looking for the rocks. There might be 15 rocks in there. You're looking for the rock that is screaming at you the most, the one that is the heaviest, the one that stands out to you the most. And there's lots of different ways that we can find those rocks. For me, my most favorite activity is when they use their intuition. So they don't use any palpation, meaning they can't feel where the rock is. They have to close their eyes and just let their hand fall where they believe it needs to fall. And more often than not, they find the rock the fastest and the most accurate
Oh,
when
yeah.
it comes to intuition.
I deeply believe that. And
Yeah.
I think that is the gift of healers and body workers. And I don't believe everyone has that gift or ability for energy work and intuition and feeling. But those that are called to these
Mhm.
types of professions are very much, it's a gift that you've been given from whatever you believe in. God, universe,
Absolutely.
you can
Yeah.
attach the name to that. So, so tell me, Meaghan, like, Okay, I wanted to go back to your own births because then you said like they had these. Were you not a craniosacral therapist at that time?
I was not, no.
Ah, okay. Well, that makes more sense now because I'm like, okay, why didn't you just work on your own kids? So is that what brought you to this work? Like what brought you here to CST work?
So before I had babies, I wanted to become an osteopath. I wanted to, um, and I thought that that was the only way I would be able to treat babies. I wanted to work with babies. I love them so much. I need them in my life all the time. And so I thought, oh, I have to be an osteopath in order to do that. But I applied for osteopathy school and I was rejected. They said, no, you need to go become a massage therapist first because you don't have enough anatomy knowledge. So I said, okay, fine, I'll go and I'll do massage therapy. And I graduated massage therapy school, and 6 weeks later, I was pregnant. And my mother-in-law gave me a book on how to, it was a Ina May Gaskin's, one of her books. Was it Ina or an Ina? Ina May?
Ina
Ina
May.
May? I
Mm-hmm.
thought so. Anyway, so she gave me one of these books and I was like, oh my God, I love labor. This is amazing. So I read so many books and I was like, maybe I'll become a doula. So I did after my son was born, I did the doula training. But he was the kind of kid who had to sleep in my armpit all night long. Otherwise, nobody got sleep. And so we were co-sleepers and I thought, I can't get out of bed at 3, 4 a.m. in order to go to a birth. That I didn't think of it. But I'm so glad I did the doula training because it taught me so much about the birthing experience in the hospitals because I didn't have a hospital. I've never had a hospital birth. So it taught me a lot about that. And so because I was trying to become a doula, I was listening to doula podcasts and on it was this woman who was talking about craniosacral therapy for babies. And I was like, and I had already known about craniosacral because my sister had got it done when we were kids. And I was like, I could just do craniosacral for babies. So I don't have to become an osteopath. And it was like my entire future was clear. I knew exactly what I needed to do with my life. It was the most fascinating experience.
Ooh, Meaghan, I have goosebumps everywhere.
Yeah, it was
Like,
so fun. Yeah.
well, it's not everyone gets this clear gift in their,
Mhm.
in at least in this lifetime, right? And in or in one
Yes.
lifetime. So to have been given this clear path and vision, and it may change for us, right? Like in 10 years, it may be a deeper path or a path to the left or a path to the right. But to have
Mhm.
this moment, this goosebumpy moment where you're like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to go. But then you listened to that whisper, that intuition inside of you, and you did something with it. Oh, that's so cool. So then what's the
I
next
did, but
path?
I must say that I had the aha moment and then I got pregnant again.
Oh, okay. You know, that happens.
So it was another 2 years before I could go and take my training that I really wanted to take. So
Okay.
it was years after my aha moment that I was able to bring it into like fruition.
Were
Yes.
you listening to it the whole time or were you
The whole
burying it a
time.
little bit? Okay. So
It
you,
was screaming the whole time.
okay. So you were probably still devouring content about it. I would take a guess,
Oh, yeah,
about,
absolutely.
all of the things. And those probably really informed the type of births that you had, easy, gentle births at home. I love it. Now you guys, Meaghan said she was in Canada. I'm in the United States. Birthing in Canada is a little bit different than birthing in the US because, well, I've heard from other people on the podcast that they actually, the healthcare system pays for home birth, that it's legal,
Yes.
and that you
Yes.
get midwifery care and all that. That is not the case here in the US. Like in my state, home birth is
Right.
illegal.
Where do you live?
Look at your face, Meaghan. I wish you could see her face. That is a real statement. Now, it's not illegal for me, right? Like I'm allowed to give birth wherever I want, but that would be a free birth. It is illegal for our midwives to practice midwifery in the home in the state of North Carolina and in many states. and the United States. So this is sort of like we have like the underground, right? Like, of course, we're having home births everywhere, right? But it's like this
Absolutely.
underground whisper kind of whatever. So I just like, this is where I'm like dual learning, right? So when you gave birth at home, though, that was something that you could like in Canada, you could easily plan, be supported. Your insurance would have paid for that, and you would have had midwifery care, presumably.
So it's not my insurance. I don't have insurance.
Right, the health system.
That was just the government of Canada paid for it.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Did you get a doula? Does the government pay for doulas too?
No, that's out of pocket.
Okay.
But if you do have insurance and the doula is a naturopathic doctor or a registered massage therapist like me, then it can get covered under your insurance. Yeah.
So if I ever move to Canada, I should become a registered massage therapist first.
Yes.
Thank you for that information, because now that,
absolutely.
Well, I'm not going to get into that. I'm recording in 2024.
If you ever want to come up here,
so
you are welcome.
There's a lot of people that are interested in visiting Canada right now. Who knows?
Yes, no doubt.
I will come see you. We'll pretend that this is not something political. And I am going to come to Toronto in 2026.
Yeah.
I've promised my kids we will see a World Cup game in Toronto.
Do you know how close I live to where the World Cup game is?
No, but it sounds like we're going to get coffee in 2026.
I have a 10-minute walk, not a 7-minute walk to where the World Cup game will be played.
Well, let me know if you'd like to rent your house out to me and you'd like to go.
We have an
else.
Airbnb next door. I'm not even
so
kidding.
Excited.
It's a 3-bedroom Airbnb next door.
Okay, well, can you like put my name on it for a few games? And my 2 kids, I have promised them that we would do. I should probably cut all of this out of the podcast, you guys. Who knows? Maybe I'll keep it in. But I played soccer internationally in South Africa, and I have been to the World Cup in South Africa, and it was so fun. And I've promised my kids as soon as they were old enough to remember, which they will be 12 and 11 in the 2026 World Cup. So I said, that's old enough to remember
that for sure.
All right. Well, I'm very excited. We will see you in Toronto.
Can't wait to meet you.
I know. This is so great. Okay. So back to CST. So I want to know that path in case this is an aha goosebumpy moment for someone else. So you finished having your babies. Now you have your certified doula. Have you been to like a 4-year college before you went to massage school? So
no, it was massage school. Is 2 years here in Canada.
Okay, so you went to massage school. You had your babies.
Mm-hmm.
Then what type, like where, I know you started your own school, Beames CST. So is that what someone would do then? Would they still follow that same path?
No, I'm a crazy person.
Okay. All right. Well, tell me more.
I don't know how many people have done what I've done, but very few, probably like 2 other people in the whole wide world. But anyway, so I went to Portland, Oregon to train with Carol Gray. I wanted to go and train with her specifically because she was a retired midwife, and because I was a doula or trained to be a doula, wanted to be a doula, I wanted to know her perspective and her perspective on the baby and their experience with birth. And so that's who I wanted to learn from. There was a guy here who was like, I do cranio for babies and I'm going to teach everyone. But he didn't let anyone in his classes touch babies. And so you had to watch
I just had a physical
babies.
reaction, you guys, that you can't see because it's a podcast, but I shook in a weird way. Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
Shocking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I wouldn't have been able to treat a baby under the supervision of a supervisor, essentially. And that to me was like, no, it's totally worth it for me to travel to another country, pay for the flight, pay for all the, instead of taking it in my own city. So I went to Carol Gray. I took her training. I came home and it was like, this is amazing.
How'd you know who Carol Gray was?
She's the person who I was listening to on the podcast.
No way.
That's
so cool. Okay.
So I went there. It was amazing. I learned so much. I came home. I started a business. And the first year, the first like 5 months, I made like $5,000. Then the next year I made $20,000. Then the next year I made $40,000. And the year after that, I made $100,000 just for infant craniosacral therapy.
Okay. This is where I'm going to sound super ignorant. Is that is Canadian dollars and US dollars pretty similar?
I mean, Yes, our minimum wage is about $5 more than yours an hour, actually. I think we get paid a little bit better for like minimum wage staff.
Okay.
But it would not be in a conversion. We wouldn't convert to yours. It would still be like 100 like per hour. I was making 150 an hour.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty
So
good.
that's
I mean, like, that's not
pretty
pretty
much the
good. That's
same.
like really good.
It's like really good. Yeah.
Like, it's like really good.
So
Minimum wage here is like, I don't even know, $12 an hour.
11.
So,
Yeah. And our minimum wage is 17 now, I believe.
okay.
So I mean, $100,000 here, it's my salary would have been the same for anyone who is in the States. So
Wow.
my students actually generally make anywhere between 50 to 100 if they are doing cranio specifically, solely cranio.
Beautiful. And you get to work with babies
Yeah,
and you get to do healing
I know.
work,
Yes.
And like you said, and you get to impact maybe 1 million lives when you get to
Yes.
your goal or more. What a beautiful job. So if this is on anyone's heart, this is why I kind of took that turn with Meaghan, because I know
Yes.
there's a lot of birth workers who listen to the podcast also. So I wanted to be a little bit inspiring there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I have a few more questions before we end the
Oh.
podcast about like the newborn infant stage and sort of, I know you said you worked on evidence. So
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit about like a baby comes to you or a craniosacral therapist and they have one of the issues that we have discussed, like let's stick to feeding, let's say.
Yeah.
They've
It's the most
had
common.
let's say we've already revised the tongue tie or the lip tie or
Mhm.
the cheek tie. It's been revised. The baby is still struggling to gain weight.
Mhm.
Tell me about the types of things you would do to their body, how long a session is, and in Canada, if the health system covers that or if that is private pay.
Yeah. So I'll kind of put it in a nice little nutshell. Usually it's a 1 hour session for the first, either 1 hour to an hour and a half, depending on how much you need to talk and if the baby poops and all those things. But the hands-on portion is about 25 to 35 minutes. The rest is talking. We want to know your story. We want to know exactly how you are feeling, how baby is feeling, what your experience is. What other symptoms have they changed since the last time we saw you? Um, it's not covered by our health coverage, so it is out of pocket unless you have health insurance through your work, and then mm, partially covered usually, and then the rest you have to pay the rest. Um, so if this baby is having feeding issues, and one of the most common reasons why babies come to me is because they had a tongue tie release and it doesn't, they're not really doing a whole lot better. I wish that it was they came to me, then they got a tongue tie release because a baby who has a tongue tie has oral dysfunction. They've never had a tongue that worked properly. So then you go and you cut a tongue that doesn't work properly. It's not going to suddenly know how to work properly. And so for me, I want to optimize the cranial nerves, so the nerves that go from the brain to the tongue or the from the brain to the throat, in order to have a functional mouth. And then you go and you get the tongue tie release. So let's say that's optimal. That's amazing. If that doesn't happen, what we're doing is we are going to find the areas within the cranium, right? They get the head molding. Their head comes out kind of a funny shape. People say, oh, it'll go back in 24 hours. Sure, the bones might go back in 24 hours, but the fascia doesn't. The fascia is still tight. And if that fascia is still tight, so too are the cranial nerves. And the nerves are what send the messages to that face to work properly. So the babies who like cheeks are like, meh, they're not working, they dribble milk, that's a cranial nerve dysfunction. The babies who feed really well on one side and then they get really frustrated on the other, that's usually an asymmetry in their cranium and cranial nerve dysfunction.
Thank
So
you for
what we're,
saying that because
yeah,
so many women blame their body.
I know. well, I don't make enough milk on that one side. So they get
Mhm.
frustrated. No, your baby can't feed well on that side. Usually this is very, very, I'm not going to say everyone, but because there's like, you know, maybe there was a cyst or there's something removed or something, the surgeries or something like that. But for the most part, it's the baby's not functioning well on that side. And so the demand is not there. So you don't produce because the baby is not capable of pulling milk. And then you just don't produce that much on that side.
Mhm.
So what we do is we optimize the oral function by releasing fascia between the bones of the upper palate, the bones around the ears and the neck and the throat. And even the back of the head, there's lots of tension that's held within the scalp and everything. So we release all of those things so that the mouth works better.
Wow. Are
Yeah.
they just like, when you have physical touch, I think they say it takes 30 or 60 seconds of
Mhm.
constant physical touch before like big amounts of oxytocin are released. I know like in our family, you're not allowed to let go of a hug for 30 to 60 seconds. And my kids are like
Oh,
wiggling and I'm like, gotta stay here. So do you see that when you put your hands on the babies, do they sort of fall into this relaxed state like you would when you're getting a massage, or are they fussy
yes
through it?
and no. Yes
Okay.
and no. So yes, if they don't have digestive issues, if they have reflux, or if they have are having trouble digesting different proteins, um, then a lot of times we're working through pain. So this baby's in a lot of pain. But we help with that because the fascia, perhaps in the intestines, are tight. And so the intestines don't move well. So we release the fascia, the intestines move better, they can digest better. Um, and so sometimes they're able to just really melt and they just become like butter. If they're, reclined, their arms kind of splay out and they're just like, ugh.
Mhm.
And then we pass the baby back and the parents are like, oh my God, I've never felt them so loose. It's like I have a brand new baby.
Mhm.
And then, um, yeah, and then other times we're just really trying to get their digestive tract to work optimally. But what I like to say is like, if this baby is scream crying at me, it's not up to me to decide whether this is an emotional release or if they are in fear. If they are scared, and I can tell by the way the sound of the cry, then I pass them back to the person who they feel safest with. That is not me. And there are some ways of treating that they are teaching in the States where it's like, oh, that's an emotional release. Just work through the cries and they'll get through it. And I feel like that is it's not compassionate. I don't believe there's healing in fear. So I like
I would
to make
agree.
sure this baby is feeling safe. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say like that's like me trying to go to therapy like with a brand new stranger in the middle of a panic attack. Like nothing's going to get accomplished that day.
And they're like, don't worry, it's fine, patting your back. And you're like, no, it's not
And
fine.
then I'm
It
like, "Who are
continues
you?"
to be unfine.
Yeah, stop talking to me, stranger. Uh
Yes, exactly.
I think it's important that we remember that babies are just little humans, you know,
Yes.
and they feel everything. It's so
Yes.
important. I'm
And
learning
whenever I
so
do pass
much,
them
Megan.
back,
Oh,
I know I told you we were going to talk forever.
I was like, this
Um,
is amazing. I'm just mind blown right now. Have you written a book yet? Like,
no, not yet.
okay, well,
One day
put that on the
it'll come
to-do
out.
list.
I got nothing else to do. So
Ha ha.
you can listen to my podcast. You can listen to, yeah, I talk a lot about this on my podcast. I don't think I mentioned that. I'm also a podcast host. And so I talk a lot about this experience.
What's
It's
your
called
podcast called?
oh, the My Baby Craniosacral podcast. My Baby is one word. That's also the name of my private practice in Toronto.
Okay.
Because everyone calls and they're like, my baby is having trouble. My baby. And I was like, well, if this is for your baby, then it's just going to be called My Baby.
I love it. All of this is going to be linked in the show notes, you guys.
Oh,
Because I was like,
amazing.
woo, we need to give some podcast shout outs. I'm my doula Heidi because everyone would just refer me. This is my doula Heidi. This is my, hi, have you met my doula Heidi? So eventually I just
You get it.
became my doula Heidi. So tell me the name of your podcast again.
My baby, one word, craniosacral,
Mm-hmm.
Craniosacral, craniosacral.
Yeah. Okay. My
I
baby
think they could search it up through my
craniosacral.
name too, Meaghan Beames.
Yeah. Well, I'll link to it. But if somebody is
Okay.
like, I just want to listen to it right now or whatever,
Great.
it's nice to just sort of put it out in the world. Now,
Absolutely.
let's shout out to the other podcast that you heard. Is it Carol Gray?
Yeah, but that podcast I was listening to, it's not her podcast. She was just a guest. It was 2016, so I don't even know if it's running anymore.
Okay. I was going to say, listen, let's give love or love can, I love to like lift up other people if there's an opportunity, but it's okay. We can just say a podcast that changed
It was
your
a
life.
doula podcast. Just listen to more doula podcasts.
Well, mine wasn't around until 2019, so it wasn't mine.
Nope, wasn't.
And clearly you're the first craniosacral therapist that I have interviewed on this podcast. So
Hope there are more.
yeah. Do you know if craniosacral therapy is covered by insurance in the US?
So there are some IBCLCs who it can be covered under. If this baby is having a feeding issue, if it is deemed a feeding issue, a lot of times it can be covered by insurance. And so that's also SLPs can usually cover it. Massage, it can be covered under massage. And RNs, I believe, if it is a nurse practitioner, I think. Sometimes it can be covered under insurance.
Amazing. My lactation consultant that I exclusively work with in my area, Charlotte, North Carolina, her name's Melissa Willett. Her company's Legacy Lactation. She's a nurse practitioner and an IBCLC, and she's sort of who we maneuver these referrals through. So, Melissa, I'm coming for you. I've got some follow-up questions because she's more integrated into this world, because I sort of like pass to her and then she sort of takes over again, along with the chiropractor. But listen, Meaghan, I have a lot of reworking of my business to do. As far as
I'm sorry, and you're welcome.
Yes, for referral. And then now I'm saying I'm sorry to all past clients, and then you're welcome to all future clients also.
Exactly.
Because care is about, always be learning, you guys, even 21 years later of being a doula, always be learning. And that's why we're here today. So Meaghan, did I fail to ask you any really important questions about craniosacral therapy that you want to leave us on that note? Or do you think we've had a pretty comprehensive conversation today?
Yeah, I want to just say at the very end, like if your baby if you are struggling in any way, like let's say sleep is a little bit off, feeding is a little bit off, a little bit. I'm telling you a little bit. If they're not rolling, they're not meeting milestones, you're worried a little bit about their head shape, you notice that their eyes are turning a little bit, they're not really focusing a whole lot. These are little things that you think are little, but could be really monumental if we can get them as an infant. It can help a lot with like learning how to read and write. It can help with a lot with emotional regulation when they're teens, when they're kids. It can help with so many, many, many things. And when you're looking for a craniosacral therapist and you go, it will not be a one-time thing. Especially if this baby is over 2 months, you're looking at 3 to 7 sessions over the age of 2 months. And then if you're going for a toddler, child, teen, you're looking at probably once a month consistently for a while. Or you go once a week for 4 weeks and then monthly for a while. So the sooner you can get to these things, the better.
That is really good because I was thinking that was one of my questions that I forgot to ask you is like how long and how many sessions and that type of thing. So
It's never too late.
well, we're going to have to talk offline about my vertigo, even though you don't treat
Yes.
adults, and my child with communicating hydrocephalus and cerebral palsy. So a big question that I have, and I get this from doula world a lot too, is like, is there a website or a main place that you would recommend people go to for directories to find a credentialed craniosacral therapist in their area that is reputable?
So on my own website, I have my own graduates page. And so Beames CST, BEAMES CST.com. I have my graduates page, and we've got quite a few in the States, if most of your listeners are in the States. And if you don't see someone in your local area, maybe it's time for you to become a craniosacral therapist.
Yes. Or I would say, in my experience, if you reach out to a birth worker or
Yes.
your pediatrician, lactation consultants, IBCLCs, acupuncturists, these are other people that are typically networked with craniosacral therapists to give you a good recommendation rather than just jumping on Google. So,
Yeah, it's nice to know that people are recommending the providers. You do need to vet your people.
you do. So,
Yeah.
well, Meaghan, thank you so much for being on the Birth Story podcast. I truly, you can tell, I learned so much, and I hope that means the audience learned so much today. And I will put everything in the show notes. So if anyone is interested in becoming a craniosacral therapist, maybe they will enroll in Beames CST. If anyone's local to Toronto, to reach out to your company specifically. And then those of you that have listened to this podcast and thought, wow, I am pregnant and I'm going to be proactive. Let's add a CST to your postpartum journey. If you've already given birth, it's never too late. Thanks for being here, Meaghan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.